Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about using wipe-on poly on larger surfaces, such as this pantry cabinet that I have here. So this has a very large side, and same thing if you're doing like a tabletop or something like that. This technique is going to work much better than this type of technique that you'd use for a smaller surface like an end table or a smaller desk or something like that. Applying wipe-on poly to a larger surface requires a little different thought and a little different application. So let's take a look at how I started getting this all ready for the wipe-on poly. The first thing I'm going to do is apply some Danish oil. And when I apply the Danish oil, what I want to do is I want to get it across that surface and keep all the surface wet. So I'm going to concentrate on the side of the pantry right now. And I'm going to keep that wet for at least 15 minutes. So I'll keep reapplying it. And you can see I'm working from a tub of Danish oil rather than from the can pouring it onto the rag. And I just keep wiping, going back and forth. And when I see one area that starts to dry, I'll apply more oil to it. Now I don't want to over flood the surface, but I do want to keep the surface wet. So I don't want large puddles on there. I just want to keep it all wet so that it's not drying. Any places that are starting to dry, I add more because I want it to soak in as much as possible during those 15 minutes. After everything is soaked in, I'm going to come back and wipe it all off. Just completely wipe it down as well as I can so that it's all dry and even. And then I'm going to start working on the front of the cabinet, which is all Purple Heart. Now the reason I'm going to do the Purple Heart separately is that with Danish oil, as you apply onto the Purple Heart, it stains your rag and stains the oil. So it gives the oil a little bit of a purplish color. And you don't want to have that applied to your maple. So I'm going to apply it, I'm going to go ahead and apply the Danish oil to the front of the cabinet at the end. So my side is already done, all my maple is done, then I'm going to apply this. Now on the doors, they have a smaller area of Purple Heart, so it doesn't affect it as much. It's mostly maple, so you're not getting the color transfer in the oil from one to the other. Okay, so for larger areas, a little different doing wipe-on poly because you want to do it quickly. So I'm just going to walk you through what I do. I have just an old cup here. You know, it could be a butter cup or, you know, any of the little plastic cups you get with vegetables or fruits or whatever you have in it. I have an old sock here that's cut in half, and I'm just going to use this part. I'm going to hold on to this and use this part to wipe everything on. And I got my wipe-on poly here, satin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into this cup because it's been open. I'll have to do this. And I'm going to pour this right on in this cup. Side. So what you want to do is start down this corner. A little bit different than the way that we did the oil is that you want to get a section done and then move on because it's going to start drying. Now this is actually where you're going to build up a finish onto this. The oil is soaked into the wood, and so you really don't have a top coat finish on it. And it's going to give a little more to protection for you. And you can see that I want to thin out whatever I put on here relatively thin. I don't want to leave big droplets because you want this to flatten out as much as possible, and you don't need that much on there. That's why we have to do 3 coats, because it's just a small amount. Now you can work relatively fast with this, and this is my preferred way of doing this, especially larger areas. And you can see that I go across this line right here, and I come back, and then I wipe forward, just like that, to make sure everything's flat. And start back a little ways from where you last worked. So you want to start, like, put the big drops down in front of it. So for example here, let me show you what I'm going to do here. So I have a line right here. So I'm going to put the drop here and put it right on down there. And you notice that I started it back here. The line is here, but I start here with the paint, or with the finish, I should say, with the wipe on. So I start here with the wipe on. But If you get too much, you need to make sure that you get nice smooth areas, because you don't want too much on there. If you get a large amount on there, it doesn't dry quite as well as it can. So you want wipe-on poly, you want it to be relatively thin coat. It's not like a brush on, and it will lay down after it sit there for a little while. Now once you've gone over one area, you definitely do not want to go back to the area that you've already been. I don't want to go back down that way at all. I want to stay up here. If you have any spots down there that you find out later on they don't look quite right, you know, maybe it's too heavy or too thin, leave it alone for the next coat. And you notice that I'm using sort of like a wax on type application, which doesn't matter. You don't have to go with the grain. I sort of come back this way only because I'm adjusting this. I don't want to leave marks. And you can also go back this way and lift as you get to the point there, and that sort of gives you a little cleaner line down there. But the main thing is you just don't want to make a very large line here with anything. You see that I'm going real quick on those because they are already starting to dry over there. Yeah, just a tiny bit here. And the main thing is to make sure that you're at an angle. I don't know, you maybe can't see, but I have the open garage there so I can see the light coming across here. So I can see if I have any thick parts on there. And then it's just a matter of working your way down the front. Now I'm going to do all of my Purple Heart here. Blend that right in with this. Wipe-on poly is very much thin coat. You're just wiping it on like as if you were putting some wax on a car. Very thin coats. You don't want anything thick. Thick coats will give you drops there, and you don't want that. So that's one of the reasons I like to start above and work on down, because if I do have any drops that hit down below, I can come back and get those as I work down my way down the project here. All right, so as you can see, this doesn't take all that long. I think the length of time that is the most for wipe-on poly is the fact that you're going to do 3 coats instead of like 1 or 2. And really with a brush on, I still think you have to at least do a minimum of 2. You notice that I put my heavy drop on top here. I put it right on top. If you can see that down there, I'm hoping you can. And that way, if it drips on the side, I can catch it. And that's it. That's all I want to do to put on for my first coat. So now I'll let this dry and do 2 more coats the exact same way. So as you can see, I applied the Danish oil. I let that dry for 72 hours, and then I went ahead and applied the wipe-on poly. Now, in between each of the coats, my first coat, I'm going to sand it down with a rougher grit. I think this one here, this is the one. I use these 3M polishing pads here, or sanding pads. Not really sanding pads, they're more of a finish pad. But this is called the moderate stripping pad, ultra fine stripping pad, and final stripping pad. So I don't use the green as much as I do, as I throw that down there, as I do these two. Now after the first coat, I'm gonna go ahead and sand it all down with this. Now you can use a fine sandpaper like a 300 or 400, but I want to get all the lumps out of there that I may have applied, because the first coat I put on pretty thick. Not, you know, it's still not real thick. It's still wiped on pretty thin, like I said, but I do sand it down with this. Now the second coat, I'm going to go ahead and sand down with this one here, and this is a much finer one. The second coat I put on a little better, and now the final coat, let's see what we do on that. So as you can see on the final coat, I'm going to go all streaking with the wood. I want to keep it as even as possible, and I want just a very thin coat to go on there and give me a nice smooth finish. I don't want to go back over the finish. I want to apply it in smooth fashion like I'm doing here. And again, working from the bottom, in this case from the bottom to the top, I apply an area about a foot, maybe a foot and a half and apply it all the way across, and then come up and apply it all the way across, and come up and apply it all the way across again. And I just continue doing that all the way to the end. Now I'm always going to back wipe into the other area so that I get a nice smooth layer down there. And then I'm just going to leave it alone, not touch it, and let it all dry. Notice on my last coat that I'm wearing the paint mask here. And the reason for that is that the first 2 coats I had my garage door open, so I had plenty of air flowing through, and I had a fan behind me. And I'm not worried about the dust so much because I am sanding between coats. But the last coat I'm not going to do any sanding to. I may do a little finish pad on it, but that's about it. So I want to get as little dust as possible in that wipe on poly. So in this case I have to close down the garage door, not really have as good of air circulation as I want, so I want to make sure that for safety's sake I'm not breathing in all those heavy fumes, and I have the mask on and suffer through the heat also while I'm doing that because there's no airflow going through. Okay, so as you can see, that's the way that you go ahead and apply wipe on poly to a large area like this cabinet here. The pantry is the largest cabinet that I have, so it takes a little bit of time. But the first coat, Danish oil, let dry 72 hours. Wipe on poly, the first coat, let dry 4 hours. Then I put on another coat. So I generally do that in one day. I'll put on the first coat in the morning, the second coat in the later afternoon, more towards dinner time. And then I will wait till the next day, give it a final sand, and then put on the final coat, and then I'm going to let it all dry. And after about 72 hours, everything is ready to go and be assembled again. So hopefully that has helped you learn how to, or use your own technique. This is the technique that I use. Go ahead and develop your own technique for applying wipe on poly for larger surfaces, but just keep in mind that you don't want to go back over the surface that you're already done. That's the main thing to keep in mind, I think, on the wipe on poly. But really, it's one of the easiest finishes to apply and really worth doing. All right, guys, thanks for watching, especially those of you who hang around this long. Wipe on poly can be used for larger cabinets, larger furniture. Don't be afraid to use it on that. It's a great product. If you do like this, please do like and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.